This deadly terrorist act in Crocus City Hall in the Moscow region in our country. On various continents, all these days and until this day, like non-stop regime, we receive words of compassion due to the terrorist act on the 22nd of March. We have never underlined who was the first or who was the second who sent us the words of support or condolences to the victims, to their families, and strict condemnation of this terrorist act. Because we feel compassionate for the openness, we value this support, but not trying to count all those who will be quicker and when can send us these condolences. What is important is that the whole world feels compassionate with us and denies any manifestation of terrorism without dividing and measuring to some double standards or some sophisticated scales, new criteria. We have started receiving the words of compassion from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Belarus within the few hours after the terrorist acts. The leaders of the dozens of states, Bolivia, Venezuela, India, Iran, China, Cuba, Pakistan, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, North Korea, Syria, Turkey, South Africa, and many, many other states. I cannot list all of them. All those who send official condolences to our country. I would like to underline once again, not the countries themselves, but the common people, the citizens, who write with all their soul and heart, and to all the officials, including ministers, heads of states. We've received a huge support from the world, and we are thankful to all those, regardless of the status, position, for the words of compassion and sympathy which we received. We are grateful, and we will remember this gratitude forever. We saw the people's feedback to our grief. They sent letters, messages, made up videos, how they came to our embassy all across the world to leave the words in the book of condolences. Yesterday, here in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there was a long queue of ambassadors of all the countries, chargés d'affaires, who here in this whole video filmed and make their messages in the book of condolences. In the United Arab Emirates, the skyscrapers were painted in Russian tricolor. We saw the colors of our flag, and we saw those little children coming up to our embassies with the poems and with these makeshift shrines. When they brought soft toys, flowers, parents took their children to the embassies and told them about the tragedy in Russia. We appreciate, and I even only appreciate each word, each sign of solidarity, each manifestation of compassion, and each decisive gesture which is being showed on acceptance of terrorism as methods. In many cities all across the globe, not only close to our embassies, but even in public spaces, we've seen memorials, makeshift shrines to the tragedy of the victims. I am confident they will not be temporary. I think some of them will remain forever. In honor to honor all those the victims, many people bring flowers, candles, and everybody mourn with the whole country. In the sign of solidarity with Russia, the mourning day was declared in Nicaragua, the Republic Srpska, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Abkhazia. The UN Security Council condemned the terrorist act in Krasnogorsk and honored the victims with a moment of silence. The members of the World Organization called all the countries to actively cooperate with our country to bring to justice of all those involved in this deadly terrorist act. The UN Secretary General Guterres, after his just blurred declarations, which was voiced on behalf of him allegedly, then strictly personally condemned these terrorist attacks. It is worth mentioning the response of the collective West. I would like to remind hundreds of civilians suffered, including women and children. This is qualified as a terrorist act. So what was the response of the so-called collective West? They started to find the words in order to evade such direct assessments and not to make sure that they are measuring and qualifying this tragedy in our country along the same standards with which they assess themselves. But what happened next? It is a landmark moment. Realizing the response and the feedback of the overwhelming majority, they realized they cannot keep silence and sit back and play with the words. They won't be able to do this, and they started to scantily condemn terrorists. By the way, they followed the beaten track along with the Skripal cases, Novichok, Nord Stream, not waiting even for the results of investigation, but even at least verified official information. They just found the culprit. Of course, it would be awkward for them to blame Russia. And they understood that then they become the global rogues, rogue states. So the Kiev regime made it for them. No one would realize that these moments, these days, that someone can put responsibility on our country for this grief which it suffers. But there are some people on the bank, and this is Zelensky regime, the Kiev neo-Nazism. It is well paid and well earned and supported for many years this political information by the collective West. And so it was ordered by the collective West to do this dirty job, to put the blame on our country. The Westerners themselves changed within 24 hours its statements that they closely watch, that they are not ready to make some assessments or just said it for the words to condemn the terrorist acts and to the words of compassion. And they found this culprit as a banned organization, ISIS. Let me remind for those who suddenly forgot, in preparing another act of sabotage against our country just recently, I think it was 15 days ago, top officers of Germany confessed to us. And these were the video record released of their negotiations of 4. These top officials, representatives of armed forces of Germany, they are talking with themselves. They discussed how to better to dismantle the Russian civilian infrastructure. It was about the Crimean Bridge, and we'll talk about it later in more detail. After this video record, no one in Berlin could explain to its compatriots and to the international community as a whole on which grounds today Germany believes it possible at the state level to discuss acts of sabotage, terrorist acts and extremism, which must be committed exactly by some other hands as they planned it on the territory of some other states.